Welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. This week, we're exploring an Australian classic. We're going to dive into honey myrtle. How are you, honey? I mean, Liz, how are you?
People always call me honey.
Better than being called Myrtle, I guess.
Oh, moaning Myrtle, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you know, I'm in the real world very well, but actually, I've realised through working with honey myrtle this week, maybe not as well as I thought it was. So that's interesting. It's an interesting story to tell. But I'm hoping you've got lots to say because I don't know that much about it. I do use it. I do like it a lot, but it's not one that I know loads about. Is it one you use a lot?
I'm learning to use it more because it is native to my home state. I only realized that more recently. There's oils that come from here, like Fregonia and Baronia, that I really like and work with a lot. And I've known of honey myrtle, but didn't realize it was so local. So it's growing on me. But the aroma has something about it annoys me. But what I wanted to start off with is its name, honey myrtle. Now, I think when we call a plant myrtle or our oils myrtle, we might kind of come to that assumption that, oh, they're all one big happy family. But they're not, are they? When we think about common myrtle that we talk about before from Europe, that compared to the Australian myrtles are very, very different. And not all the Australian myrtles are of the same family either. So we have, people probably heard of lemon myrtle, then there's anise myrtle, there's rose myrtle, there's a whole range of them, but they're all a scattering of different families. What's really interesting about honey myrtle is that it's actually part of the Melaleuca family. So what makes it kind of unique or special in the Melaleuca family? That's of course where we find tea tree, rosalina, niali, and so on. But this is the oil in that family that's highest in citrol. Now, citrol we normally find in lemongrass and lemon verbena, and that kind of gives it that lemony kind of honey aroma that we get in this oil. But I find it quite interesting that I guess before they were getting into the botany and exactly what family each plant came into, they're like, it's a myrtle, and they called it honey myrtle, not knowing that it's part of the tea tree family.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to pick on your accent a little bit there because when you say it, it sounds like a different thing to what I would say. So I'm going to say citral for people that are looking in books and going, I'm looking for this chemical, citral, citral, I would say. And yeah, citral is a really interesting constituent. I mean, I'm properly geeking out really on citral. I've studied it many times in many different ways and it's really important for pain, which we'll talk about afterwards. But it's kind of almost like three different common constituents in one because it's got two different isomers. So citral can either have an isomer which is geranial or an isomer which is narrow. My accent now, narrow. So, but in honey myrtle, we've got, if I remember rightly, about 40% citral and then about another 17% in the one I've got of nerel. So, that's almost like 2/3 of the oil is kind of one thing, really, which is really interesting. And as I say, I'll talk a bit about why citral is important in a minute. But I just wanted to pick up on the fact you don't like the smell. You don't like it at all?
No. I There's something that it could be the tea tree, the Melaleuca essence to it or something like that, but it doesn't smell sweet to me. Like it doesn't
It
smell
smells.
like honey.
It only smells like honey to me. So
Mm.
that's when so maybe it's the distillation for a start off, and mine is quite at an elderly bottle. That's all I'm going to say. But for British people, I'm going to tell you, it smells just like lockets. Do you know what lockets are? Do you have them?
No
So,
idea.
so,
No.
so if you've got a cough or a cold and you go to the confectioner and get throat sweets, lockets are throat sweets, and on the outside it's lemon, and on the inside there's honey. So it's like a lemon and honey that you just have on your throat, and it smells just like that to me, and it properly makes my mouth water. I absolutely love the smell of it. And it was only when, well, all week I've been avoiding doing this work, I have to tell you. So some weeks I'm like, let's get the books out. I'm really excited to do this. it was only last night. I was like, I got to about 6 o'clock and I was thinking, Steph, got the books out. What's going on with you? Why are you being like this over this oil? Are you feeling lazy? No. You've done work all day. No, you're not feeling lazy. You're avoiding this oil for some reason. I don't know why. And it was only when I sat down and wrote my notes and smelt it, I was like, oh, wow. I know exactly why I've been avoiding it. And memory came flooding right back in. And it's very obvious when I wrote it down. I was like, did you not even know that's what you were doing? So the one thing that I really, really love honey myrtle for is tooth abscesses. And so I've got one tooth, which let's not talk about me and the relationship with the dentist, but occasionally I get one here. And I put honey myrtle on and it just goes. I don't have to go to the dentist. So that is my favourite application of it and one of the reasons why I love it. But of course, in November, my husband got a tooth abscess. And so we were ladling it on and he was going, it's not getting any better. It's not getting any better. But he is one of the world's worst people for like, I've used that once, can't be asked anymore. Keep on trying. Then we got golden seal and his dentist was like, I don't know why this isn't getting better. And then, of course, it turns out that it was mouth cancer. So that was the beginning of the mouth cancer story. And so a cautionary tale, really, I guess, of like, don't just think that essential oils are going to fix things. Luckily for me, I can't hold that as guilt because he was going to the dentist and the dentist was doing tests, but that's why it took so long. But yeah, straight away, my brain was going, don't want to go back there. So interesting. And so, yeah, just how... We'll talk about the chakras afterwards and I'll come back to that story. But very clearly, I was avoiding that. And, you know, how like you go through life and you're going, don't want to go there. Don't want to go there. You think you're all right, but actually you're just burying it and don't want to go there. So it was very highlighting to me. Might have to go back there. So, but there we go. So tooth abscesses, because it is very antimicrobial and because it is also a tremendous pain reliever. Now, a tooth abscess is an acute pain situation. I always think that the English language does a disservice to how we talk about pain because acute to me means very painful. But what it actually means in medicinal terms is it's a period of pain that is short. So when we get to 6 months or longer, then it turns into chronic pain. And to me, chronic pain is it's really bad pain. Do you know what I mean? But actually, acute and chronic, they're actually descriptions of how long you've had that pain. And the reason why I point that out is because in the professional pain practitioner course that I treat, we focus really quite heavily on citral as a really important component to helping chronic pain. And the reason for that is because citral interacts with 3 receptors called the TRP receptors. Actually, TRP and there's TRM. I'll explain the difference in a minute. Trans receptor protein vanilloids, trans receptor protein menthols. So you skipped to the trick of the M in a minute. And these are pain receptors in the body, what we call nociceptors. They pick up noxious signals and send them to the brain. So TRPV is one we know really well. It's one that's cinnamon, for example, capsaicin, chili will respond to. It's what sends the body heat. And menthol is cold, and there's also TRP3, which, as far as I know, we don't have another one that really generates heat from it. But they also signal pains about danger in the body and also pain. And we talk about them as they're also like pressure and mechanical sensors. So the easiest one to imagine to make that is if you pinch, ow, that sensor understood it in the same way. And I always think this is really interesting how a bag gets heavier You know, you start carrying it, and it's like, oh, I'm all right with this, and then halfway through, you're like, that's really starting to get very heavy. It hasn't got any heavier. Your brain just starts to perceive it, and that's the TRPV receptors that give that piece of information. So what they're translating is loads of information about the environment that we are in. And that's a really important thing to consider in terms of pain. So in particular, boring, but let's, given this, the context of this conversation, let's talk about Daryl and pain. He cannot eat. And there are mechanical reasons why he cannot eat after his operation, but a lot of it is about his brain going, that's going to hurt. So maybe, and so when somebody who has, I don't know, osteoarthritis, probably can do a certain amount of walking, but their brain goes, but you're really going to suffer for this afterwards. So these chronic pain conditions are not all in the brain. That's not what I'm saying, but the brain has a lot to do with it. And this is where citral comes in. So the information that goes from the TRPV and TRPM receptors obviously get transmitted through the nervous system. So nerves only have a certain amount of length, and then there's gaps between them, and we call those gaps synapses, and there's a synaptic gap. And I've done this loads of times in different lectures, but in case anybody hasn't watched this before. So electrical impulses can go along nerves, but if there's a gap, then it cannot traverse the gap. And what happens is at the end of the nerve, there's like almost like a cupboard called a bouton. And within that bouton, there is neurotransmitters, which are neurochemicals that send information from this nerve to that nerve. And these neurotransmitters might be serotonin, they might be GABA, glutamate, dopamine. They're kind of the language of the body, to be honest. So dopamine, for example, is reward and things like and addiction and things like that. So these chemical transmitters do an important job. So the nerve takes the information from the TRPV receptor along to the bouton, sends information across the synaptic gap to the next one, and so on and so forth till it gets to the brain. So there are two main areas in the brain that take information about danger in terms of environmental danger. And what's really interesting is, depending on how much GABA, which is the calming receptor in the body, how much GABA is it that this synapse will decide which area of the brain that it goes to. So if there is a deficit of GABA at the synapse, or a deficit of enkephalins, which are like endorphins, but they're like in the brain, like the spinal column, then what will happen is, rather than going it to the danger part of the brain, it goes to the part of the brain that goes pain. So the body doesn't actually know the word pain, it knows the word danger. But what happens is, if there's not much GABA, in other words, there's not much calm in the system, it goes, this is going to be painful. And citral influences that to bring about a balance in the GABA, but also in serotonin, which is the mood modulator. So inhaling oils that are high in citral and using them topically can influence the way that the body sensitizes the body to pain. So at the moment, if somebody's in a chronic pain condition, their body actually is making new neurons in a pain mechanism. So therefore their body goes, but everything is in pain. When we influence this process of the different part of the brain, what the body goes is, okay, I can make another nerve cell that doesn't know pain as much, and it winds it down. So oils that are high in citral are extremely useful for desensitizing pain, which is the main area that I use them. But if I have coughs and colds, I would also use honey myrtle because it smells like lockets. And any kind of situation where I think, there's a bug coming, yeah, honey myrtle. And I love it in the bath. Absolutely love it in the bath. You know me and baths, but it smells so beautiful, but it's really relaxing, really uplifting. And I get properly moany and miserable when I feel ill. And it just goes, do you think maybe you're overacting a little? And makes me feel stronger. So that's me and honey myrtle.
So I guess to kind of summarize what you're saying, you talked a lot about citral, and there are other oils that are probably more common, maybe, more easily available, things like lemongrass or lemon verbena, which are high in citral. But the added bonus of honey myrtle is it's got that antimicrobial bonus as well. So that's why it makes sense for the tooth abscesses, but also when there is that aches, those pains, but there is also maybe some germs involved. Honey myrtle's kind of got a 1-2 punch. Is that what you'd say?
I would. And also, I don't know of any science to this, and there's very little written about the oil. Of course, it's in Deb's book, which I've left on my chair in the house, but it's in Deb's book. She's done a tremendous write-up on it. But I think if I were going to write a list of people that I wanted to see how good it would be, I would want to see people who have got autoimmune diseases, who've got aches and pains because of that, like Hashimoto's, or people who've got rheumatoid or arthritis, and if there's like a viral component on it. I would be really interested to see what honey myrtle could do there.
Yeah, interesting. Now, you kind of alluded to this, but if we're looking at more the emotional or the mental realm, this is definitely an oil that's kind of more relaxing, really great for those that are under pressure or high stress, more than an uplifting oil in that way. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do. And I mean, I think it's merry. I just can't understand how you could not like it. It's still funny how people have different responses to it. To me, it's almost like the feeling I get with Mandarin. It's giggly, chatty, bit of a party feeling. I just more up for life. I am with it. I think it's lovely. So very uplifting, but I would say relaxing without being sedative. But I mainly because with that high citral, that's hard to kind of relax the body. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I think it's positivity all of the way. I really like honey myrtle.
So I guess you're always talking about you're a bather. You love to use your oils in the bath. I love to diffuse. Probably would you agree that the best time to diffuse this one, it wouldn't be a morning one necessarily. It's more of like a sunset one. It's not ready for bed, but it's just winding down from the day and helping to de-stress.
I don't think I could delineate, to be honest. I'd be happy with it all day, every day.
Okay, you're a big fan of it. Interesting. Okay.
I am a big fan. I am a big fan. I think it's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's have a bit of a explore on the holistic aspects, and I find that honey myrtle really steps forward and has some really interesting attributes here. So first of all, I really love honey myrtle. We've just talked about it being really great when you are under pressure, when there's a lot of stress, or I get this idea of like you're in the middle of a big work campaign or a big kind of project of some kind, and sometimes we can be pushing for something or working through something, and there is an objective to it. But sometimes we can kind of get lost halfway through of like, why am I bothering? Why am I doing that? And I find honey myrtle is a really great oil to check back in with it and help us to kind of tether to the reason behind our hard work and our actions. Even some days we might feel a little bit like, what's the point of life? Why do I bother anymore type of thing? But honey myrtle, I find, is a really nice one for kind of really helping you to remember why you're doing what you're doing and the outcomes that you want to achieve in that way. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so really love it for that sense. So anyone who is, we have lots of oils that are great for stress, but if you feel that you're stressed and you're kind of starting to wonder, should I give up? It's kind of like, before you give up, pop it in the diffuser or have a bath of honey myrtle and kind of come back to that. What is the core purpose of what am I trying to achieve and why am I doing that hard work? So I really like it for that. Now, being an Australian essential oil as well, I find honey myrtle really resonates with Lemurian energy. Now, those that aren't familiar with the term Lemuria, many people are familiar with the term Atlantis. It was an ancient civilization. We're not too sure where, but somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere. And Lemuria is believed to be another ancient civilization that predated Atlantis, but was based in the Southern Hemisphere. And obviously, it was made up of several kind of countries that have now floated apart. Kind of look up Gondwana, that would kind of give you a bit of an idea. But Australia was a main part of that. And so a lot of Australian plants and Australian crystals, even Australian animals, carry a bit of a Lemurian energy about them. So Lemurians were renowned for, whereas the Atlanteans were able to kind of control nature and manipulate nature, the Lemurians understood nature but worked in harmony with it rather than kind of butting against it or trying to manipulate it. And I find that honey myrtle is a really great one for bringing in that connection to everything. And there's a word, and I did a great course on it a few years ago by a really interesting facilitator by the name of Daniel Foote, and it's called animism. And animism is this belief that is held by many still Indigenous cultures today that everything has a consciousness. We know we have a consciousness. We know that animals have a consciousness. Some people suspect, and you see studies occasionally, that you can hear plants, or they sing, or they respond to music and different things. But there is a belief that even weather patterns, rocks, mountains, rivers, all have a consciousness. And I find that you can use honey myrtle to facilitate connection in that kind of with things that you may not normally feel connected with. So in this day and age where we are so disconnected from nature as a whole, I find it fascinating by since the advent of electricity, women's menstrual cycles have come totally out of sync with the moon, whereas previously they were a lot more in alignment with that, as just an example. But how much we just don't connect with nature anymore, and thus we don't have a connection with, or a special connection. As kids, maybe, for myself and Liz and people in our age bracket, we played outside. We may have had a favorite tree when we were young, or a special spot in nature. I would question how many kids these days do. And so again, we're coming less and less connected to nature. Honey myrtle really will help you to reform that connection with just your natural environment and things that you may not normally connect with. So I really, really love it for that. In doing that as well, it also can help you to connect with people that you may not normally connect with. So, a big thing that is, Liz and I were having a chat earlier today about the UK elections, and we see it in European elections, and it comes up in a lot of, Western countries about immigration and understanding other nationalities and other cultures. And I think honey myrtle is a really great one for helping us to connect and understand those people, from people to animals to rivers, rocks, and weather systems, things that we don't normally have a connection with. It's a really, really powerful one. Now, to add on to that, this is a really powerful one for anyone who does any kind of distance healing. Because when we do distance healing, whether it be Reiki or some other form, what we do is we start by, I guess, kind of like throwing out the rope or the lasso, tethering to that person, and then sending that healing energy to them. Honey myrtle, I find, is amazing for helping to strengthen that connection. So whether you're sending healing, maybe you just want to send prayers or white light to a war-torn area or an area of conflict, or a family member or friend on the other side of the world who is having some issues, breathe in your honey myrtle, allow it to cleanse away any fogginess that would stop that connection, and really kind of illuminate that connection, almost like it brings this golden thread that links us all together. So it's really, really nice in that kind of connecting with our soul purpose, with our world, and with other people, especially in distance healing. It's just some of the ways. And I've got some other points, but I'll pause to take a breath and let you comment if you need to, Liz.
No, carry on.
Fair enough. The other thing that I would really use honey myrtle for is there is two ways of kind of naming our moons. So traditionally, you could name them after which zodiac sign they're in. So you may hear like the full moon in Leo, or in Capricorn, or in Gemini, or so on. And that encourages us to focus on a different aspect of our lives. The great thing about that is it doesn't matter where we are in the world, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, we're all having the same full moon. The full moon for the whole entire world is in Capricorn, for example. Now, another way is kind of a more cultural or indigenous way, where they name each moon based on what was kind of happening in the season. So there may be the snow moon, there may be the what are some other examples? The storm moon, the crow moon. It may be named after animals that have are more active at that time, different things like that. And we see, especially in like North America, it's a common practice of naming the moons in that way. Now they will reverse because obviously when at the moment the Northern Hemisphere is looking all in their flimsy singlets are looking very cool, whereas us down here are very warm. So our moons are opposite. But there is one moon that's sometimes called the rose moon, sometimes called the strawberry moon, and sometimes called the honeymoon. And this is the moon that happens in the peak of summer. So for those in the Northern Hemisphere, that would be your June full moon. And for those in the Southern Hemisphere, that will be your December moon. This is a time of celebration and gratitude. And we feel that. When it's summer holidays in the Northern Hemisphere, everyone's celebrating, everyone's going on holidays. It's a very social time. It's a very joyous time. For us, it's a very joyous time here in the Southern Hemisphere. Plus, it's the Christmas and the New Year's holidays as well. So it's a big time of celebration and festivities of all different traditions. This is a great full moon to bring in that honey myrtle, again, to remind ourselves the joy of why we're doing things, the joy of life. I find that honey myrtle was a really beautiful one to do gratitude work with on that full moon and just celebrate. When you think of honey, when you think of roses and you think of strawberries, they're very celebratory. They're very luxurious. They're very much about being in the moment of joy. And that's exactly what that moon is about, a moment to bring joy back into our lives, because in our lives, sometimes we can get so concerned with the heaviness and the mundanity and the obligations and the negativity and the challenges that we don't take a moment to just celebrate the lusciousness and the juiciness that life has to offer us as well. And honey myrtle, along with rose myrtle, strawberry gum, which is another eucalyptus as well, these types of oils are really, and of course, rose essential oil as well, are really great to bring in at this time to kind of celebrate and kind of just diffuse, bathe, make your own, natural pure fumes and wear them, aromatically dressing them. These are really nice oils to bring in around that time to just capture that essence of celebration, joy, and loving life. And that's my TED Talk.
I am flabbergasted by that. A, because it was so beautifully said, but everything you described there was like all the sort of work connecting with the earth is what Melissa do, and of course that's the other oil that's really high in citral.
Interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
And what's also interesting, kind of, we had this when we were doing the helichrysum talk, and I was like, wait, what? Hey, that's what I'm doing. Have you read my mind? That you kind of read my mind again, because I'm writing a piece about water nymphs and connecting back to nature and the tree nymphs and stuff. And so you were just talking about that. Strange that I've been having a strange relationship with honey myrtle all week, and perhaps that's what I need to sit down with to help me. Very interesting. Lots of thoughts to come out of that. Yes. Well, and given that you spoke about it so passionately, I'm surprised that you're not using it all of the time.
Yeah, it's one again that it's in the rotation. It comes out occasionally. I must admit, I diffuse it occasionally. I diffused it today to get in the mood for today's episode. It feels like a bit of blasphemy, but being part of the Melaleuca family, I clean my home with it. I wipe down benches with it, and it does bring that kind of joyous nature. But yeah, I have a theory, and it's in my Oracle deck, the Magic of Essential Oils, where if you don't like an oil, it suggests something for you to look at. Maybe for me, I do tend to I work a lot, and sometimes I forget to enjoy the fruits of my labor, or I can lose track of what the end progress is and that type of thing. Maybe there's an aversion, just like you've got the aversion because it takes you back to the journey of Daryl. Maybe my aversion is the deeper message in that way. So maybe we both got some work to do with our honey myrtle.
Well, yeah. So ask me about the chakras.
So Liz, tell me about the chakras and honey myrtle.
I don't think it works on chakra. So I have this problem. Speaking everywhere, sorry. I have this problem with oils from Australia that I can't actually tap into them that kind of spiritual way that I can with normal ones. And to me, it feels almost like, perhaps it's because I go back a really long way into history, and the chakras weren't known then because they're Indian. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yes.
But I can't actually make it sit on a chakra. So I thought, okay, try a different point of view. So given that it's honey, and even more so now that I've said about that citral melissa kind of connection, even more reason to do this. In the bee priestess teachings, we don't call them chakras, we have different energy centers, and we call it the inner nectary. And I'm not going to go into the inner nectary because it's not fair on other people that teach it and pay that, but the difference with them is that rather than it being kind of connected to glands, they are connected to glands, but they're connected to the secretions of the glands. So the one that I feel that it connects to is what we call the teacher, which connects to the thyroid gland, which is at the throat. So make your own conclusions for that. But the nectar of the teacher is saliva, which is a magical thing because, of course, you know, you bless things, you kiss things, you know, mommy kiss it better. You know, saliva is a magical fluid, and one that the priestesses would use. But what's interesting is that both of us talked about how the oil seemed to be, is it trying to teach me something? And that is called the teacher. That was the first thing that I picked up on. That does feel like that it wants to talk to me. It wants to speak to me. But I am aware that sometimes, like, I will always hear essential oil speaking to me, but sometimes they don't speak in English. So, and when I picked it up and I thought, right, move your perception. This does speak bee language. Does it get covered in bees?
I don't know, to be honest. I'm guessing, you know, it will have its small flowering parts, and bees would, but yeah.
I reckon bees would, because it smells like honey.
Yeah, quite possibly.
And the bees always speak for community, for working for community, but also for working for the other realms, just as you were saying.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to disagree with you on this one. For me, it's a sacral chakra one, but it's not kind of like your mundane kind of sacral chakra oil, which is just about our creativity and our connection to our lovers and that kind of thing. I feel because it does form, it's almost like a higher octave of the sacral chakra, if that makes sense. It forms intimate connections with things that are not necessarily intimate with us. Does that make sense? It allows you to form an intimate connection to a tree, to a mountain, to someone far away, to really feel that, I guess, kind of draw in that web of life. It almost kind of draws us all in a little bit closer, like a spider reels something in on its web type of thing. So I find it's a really great intimacy oil in that way. And it does help us to luxuriate, as I was talking about with the honeymoon as well. So that's very much the pleasure of the sacral chakra. So for me, I'm popping it on the sacral chakra.
I like the explanation, but if you were to lay that over the physicality of the oil, the only sacral kind of physical thing that I can think of is, I would choose it for urinary infections. But sacral chakra physical medicine is periods, wouldn't really go down that route. Sexual drive wouldn't really be going down that route. So I wouldn't use it that way. That's not to say it would be wrong for you to use it that way. But I really like your description of it.
And I think that's the way that normally when we are having our chakra conversation, you're like, okay, so where's it going to impact in the body? That's the chakra type of thing. So whereas I'm looking at what is it giving us to our lives, or what aspect of our lives is the impact, and which chakra does that resonate with? And I find honey myrtle is that intimate connections. That's the sacral chakra.
You're absolutely right, because that is what happens when we do it, isn't it? But when I choose an oil, I want it to be able to go, and it does that, and it does that, and it does that, and it does that, because whilst oils don't have side effects, they do have many main effects. So I want it to choose as efficiently as possible to be able to get one that doesn't. I don't need to have millions and millions of oils, although I have to say, when I sit with oils in front of me, I go, "Find a bit of that and another bit of that." I cannot be restrained. But on a piece of paper, I want it to be able to go, right. So I want to do that on all the different levels, mind, body, spirit levels. So, which is why I always go right at, but also on the physical level.
Now, talking about astrology, we may go off on a bit of a tangent here, but this kind of is quite interesting considering that you've been exploring nymphs, because nymphs have been coming up a little bit for me recently. So first of all, we've all heard of Chiron. We've discussed Chiron in our episodes before, and Chiron plays a prominent part in astrology and actually goes into retrograde at the end of this month. But Chiron had a wife who was a nymph called Teretifolia, and she was a nymph who actually transformed herself into a centaur to be with Chiron and represents the loving nature of healing. But I'm not going to talk about Teretifolia today, although I love that nymph. Another nymph was actually the wife of Neptune, and I've only started learning about her in the last 24 hours. So I'm not going to swear to be an expert or even pronounce her name right, but I believe it's Salacia, and she was a nymph who, Neptune fell in love with and pursued her, and she eventually came back and said, "Okay, I'll marry you." And I assume they lived happily ever after, as well as one married couple can. But she, in astrology, she's been gifted. There's an amazing astrologer in New Zealand called Alan Clay. Anyone who loves astrology and wants to get into like asteroids and the minor planets like I get excited about, Alan Clay is someone you need to look up. And he's got a new book out that looks at 10 potential dwarf planets. So these are smaller planets like Pluto, right out in the extremes of our solar system. And he looks at, okay, so these actually govern our evolution. So once we kind of get to Pluto and we've kind of fully formed and understand ourselves as a person operating in this world, and then we've got these 10 dwarf planets that actually guide us through our spiritual growth, which is really interesting. And so Latvia, to my understanding, actually governs our ability to open up to love, to intimacy, and she also has a bit of a sexual energy, not in a real kind of like erotic sexual, but just like getting rid of all frigidity and kind of almost like that hippie-free love, kind of loving everyone type of energy. So although I previously had dedicated, because of the white blossoms of honey myrtle, to the moon and that kind of magical energy, if I'm going to have to start to bump something over and work with this dwarf planet that I'm really interested in, I'm going to give it to Salacia.
I like it, and I can help you explain it better.
Please do. Please do.
Well,
as I said, it's been a one-day project so far.
Yeah, well, okay, so she's not a nymph, I know well, but from the point of view that she married Neptune, and Neptune is flow.
Yes.
And so he is water. He is the way that liquid moves, as well as like his delusion and all of that stuff. We'll park that. That's irrelevant to this. But that idea that there are stones in my way, well, liquid can get through. She finds a way to do things. She allows her desire, her want for Neptune to make her fluid, and that she is able to go with the flow. So again, just as I was saying about, right, I put it in the water and everything just kind of shifts, stuck emotions. That's absolutely bang on. Wouldn't have gone there, but perfect, that is.
Yes. Would you have an astrological allocation for this one?
Yeah, so I'm going to say Mercury.
Yeah.
But I like yours better. But I do think that it is also mercurial, and so the idea mercurial rather than Mercury. That idea. Well, I've picked a center that is called the teacher. That Mercury rules the teacher-student relationship, of that sort of passing of information backwards and forth. And of course, we've been talking accidentally, was not planned with either of us, but we're talking about hidden realms speaking to us, left, right, and centre, aren't we? And so even just on the most prosaic level of me knowing, like observing, you're avoiding that. It's something you don't want to see. That's a very mercurial thing of like, I'm choosing to ignore that. That's quicksilver trickery. Remember that he is the magician, you know, and Mercury is Hermes. So he can go up to the higher realms, down to the lower realms. So you can likewise go past, future, or as you say, send out healing, you know, overcome time and space. That's very mercurial. So Mercury.
Yeah. Well, I must admit, Honey Myrtle, you were a bit worried that you didn't have much to talk about. We've gone off on some really interesting tangents today. I found it really interesting where we've ended up, and I hope everyone who's been either viewing us or listening has got something out of it as well. But if nothing else, get some Honey Myrtle and let us know in the comments what you feel about it. Is there anything else that we've left unturned, any stones unturned about Honey Myrtle, or do you think we've done it justice?
No, there is something, and that is safety. We just get a little bit carried away, don't we? So it is. It's a myrtle, so there is levels of 1,8 cineol, but really, really low. So you don't really need to worry about the idea of not putting it on children because it slows respiration like you would with eucalyptus or menthol, actually, for that matter. That's irrelevant. It's really, really low. However, it's really high in citral. Citral is quite skin sensitizing. So that would be a reason not to put it on children's skin, not for the other reason, but this is a reason not to. And even as an adult, if I remember rightly, Tisserand and Young ignore the IFRA recommendation. They say 0.6 for citral, but they say, well, we still wouldn't go, if I remember rightly, higher than 0.9%. And I would say, yeah, 1% is as high as you want to go on the skin, definitely. But really, inhaling, that's the deal. And when I should say that when I put it in the bath, guess what I put it in?
What? Honey.
Honey, of course I do. Honey, yeah, I wouldn't put it like neat into the bath. I would put it in. Milk is also lovely, but not the same. I mean, I am quite into the idea of like being Cleopatra, but honey is really lovely. Yeah.
Now, you did mention before it's great for the tooth abscesses that you popped it on your tooth before. Is that just a bit of straight dab oil on the finger and onto that area, or what would you recommend for people at home doing that? Or are you being naughty and ignoring your rules?
Also ignoring the rules. Between you and I stick it on neat and it hurts like buggery, but that's what I do. But if you excuse my language, awful. But yeah, I would put it into a carrier if you're a bit of a wuss. Like I kind of start off with a carrier and then go, but it's not working, get it on. So yeah, I just ignore all of the things. So you'll probably get me sacked now from my job, but that is yeah.
Now, all this talk about honey, you may be going, well, what else is there to do with honey? We do have a bit of a plan for the next few months of some different essential oils that we're going to explore. Some of them are quite commonplace, but there are some unusual ones. And honey absolute, you told me about, that I had never heard of. So I'm quickly trying to acquire myself some so I can work with it. But that's another episode that we're going to dive into. We'll cover it at a later date. We won't say when, just later.
Yeah, you can blame my sister for that. She was like, did you know this honey absolute one? Yeah. And they kind of ignored it. And then she turned up with someone and I was like, oh, this is exciting. So yeah, honey absolute.
We'll explore that. But that's all for today. You can go and explore your honey myrtle until then. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Bless the bee.
Bye-bye.